The wooden gavel was already suspended in the air. The courtroom had gone completely still, in the way rooms only go still when a person's entire history is about to be erased. Clara Evans was 82 years old. She stood before the judge wearing a faded wool coat frayed at the cuffs, gripping a worn leather handbag. She looked impossibly fragile in the massive, echoing room. Beside her, standing a comfortable 3 feet away, was Richard Sterling, a lawyer for a corporate land developer. He tapped a gold pen against his expensive briefcase, checking his watch with an expression of profound boredom. Clara owed exactly $4,120 in back property taxes. In exactly 10 seconds, the judge was going to strike the gavel. The home where Clara had lived for 50 years, the home where she had baked pies, planted hydrangeas, and nursed her husband until his final breath, would legally belong to the bank. It would be bulldozed by Friday to make room for a luxury parking garage. The judge looked down. His eyes were sympathetic, but rigid with the law. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Evans. The deadline was 10 a.m. today. It is 10:01. There is nothing more this court can do." Clara closed her eyes. She didn't fight. She was simply too tired. The judge began to bring the gavel down. Then the heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom burst open with a violent crack. A young man stood in the doorway, his chest heaving violently. He wore a dark blue, grease-stained uniform from a local auto repair shop. His hands were black with engine oil. He ignored the armed bailiff. He marched straight down the center aisle, walked right past the smirking corporate lawyer, and slammed a heavy grease-smudged bundle onto the judge's immaculate wooden bench. What spilled out of that bundle in the next 60 seconds would silence the entire courtroom, bring the corporate lawyer to his knees, and prove that a single bowl of soup can change the history of an entire town. But before we uncover why a kid with oil on his hands stepped up when the rest of the world looked away, if you believe that we must protect the elderly people in our communities, please like this video, subscribe to Storybuddy, and share this with someone who needs a reminder today that kindness always comes back around. The boy's name was Leo. To understand what he just slammed onto the judge's bench, you have to leave the warm courtroom and go back 3 bitterly cold winters. 3 years ago, Leo did not have a job fixing cars. At 17 years old, after falling through the cracks of a broken foster care system, Leo was living in the back seat of a broken-down sedan behind a strip mall. It was the coldest January the city had seen in 4 decades. The snow was piled 3 feet high. Every night, Leo would walk the streets just to keep his blood moving so he wouldn't freeze in his sleep. And every night, his route took him past a small blue house on Elm Street, Clara Evans's house. One evening, looking through her frosted front window, Clara saw a teenage boy shivering violently under a streetlight, searching through the neighborhood garbage cans. Clara didn't call the police. She didn't lock her deadbolt. She went into her kitchen. The next night, as Leo walked past the blue house, his stomach cramping from hunger, he saw something on the snowy porch. It was a large, insulated thermos. Wrapped tightly around it was a thick, red hand-knitted wool scarf. Leo crept up the steps, unscrewed the lid, and steam billowed out into the freezing air. It was homemade chicken and vegetable soup. He drank it sitting in the snow, crying silently into the dark. For the next 40 days of winter, the routine never changed. At exactly 7 p.m., the soup appeared. Clara never waited to see who took it. She never demanded a thank you. She just left it there, an invisible lifeline thrown into the freezing dark. Leo survived that winter entirely because of Clara. The warmth of that daily meal gave him the energy to walk 2 miles to an auto shop, where he begged for a sweeping job that turned into an apprenticeship. Leo never knew the old woman's name. Clara never saw his face, but he kept the red wool scarf. He kept it folded in his locker at the auto shop, a reminder that he was worth saving. Fast forward to the morning of the court hearing. It was 8 a.m. Leo was underneath a luxury silver BMW at the auto shop, draining the oil. The owner of the car, Richard Sterling, the corporate lawyer, was pacing the garage floor just a few feet away, loudly talking on his cell phone. "Yes, the demolition crew is booked for Friday." The lawyer laughed. Some 82-year-old widow on Elm Street, the blue house, missed her tax payment by $4,000. The judge hands over the deed to us at 10 a.m. sharp. Underneath the car, Leo froze. The hot oil splashed onto his hands, but he didn't feel it. Elm Street, the blue house, the widow. Leo scrambled out from under the chassis. It was 8:15 a.m. The courthouse was across town. He had exactly 1 hour and 45 minutes to raise $4,120. He ran to his boss's office. Big Mike, a man with hands like cinder blocks, looked up. "Mike, I need an advance on my pay right now. It's the lady in the blue house on Elm Street. The bank is taking her home in an hour." Mike went completely still. "Mrs. Evans," Mike stood up. 20 years ago, when my wife was sick with cancer, Clara Evans baked us a casserole every Sunday for a year so I wouldn't have to cook." Mike opened the heavy metal safe, pulled out a canvas bank bag, and dumped the shop's entire emergency cash reserve onto the desk. "It's only $1,200, Mike said grimly. "It's not enough." Leo shoved the cash into the canvas bag. "It's a start." The clock hit 8:45 a.m. Leo sprinted down Main Street. The cold morning air burned his lungs. He pushed through the doors of the Silver Spoon Diner. The breakfast rush was in full swing. "Maria," Leo shouted to the head waitress. "Clara Evans is losing her house to the developers in an hour. We need $2,000 more." Maria stopped pouring coffee. She grabbed a metal spoon, banged it against a water pitcher until the restaurant went quiet, and yelled, "You all know Clara Evans on Elm Street. 10 years ago when my house burned down, Clara clothed my kids. The bank is taking her house today. Empty your pockets." Plumbers, electricians, and school teachers opened their wallets. Men threw 20s and 50s onto the counter. A retired police officer wrote a check for $500. Leo scooped the money into the canvas bag. 9:30 a.m. in the courtroom. Clara sat alone on a wooden bench. The lawyer, Richard Sterling, walked in, his expensive leather shoes echoing on the marble floor. He didn't even look at her. He just smiled at the judge. 9:35 a.m. Leo ran into the local pawn shop. He threw his own personal toolbox onto the counter. "Give me whatever you have." The pawnbroker pushed the tools back, opened his register, and shoved $300 into the bag. "Clara tutored my son when the school gave up on him." Go matey 9:45 a.m. Leo sprinted toward the courthouse. The canvas bag was incredibly heavy, bursting with loose change and quarters. Suddenly, with a sickening tear, the canvas seam ripped open. Hundreds of coins crashed onto the concrete sidewalk. Leo dropped to his knees, his grease-stained hands desperately scooping up the money. He had nothing to carry it in. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out the thick red wool scarf he carried every day, laid it on the pavement, and dumped the money into the center, tying it into a tight knot. 9:55 a.m. The courthouse steps. His legs were burning. 10 a.m. Clara stood before the judge. The gavel was raised. 10:01 a.m. Leo hit the heavy oak doors. The courtroom was dead silent as Leo stood before the judge, his chest heaving, his uniform stained with sweat and engine oil. "She owes $4,120, Leo gasped. He slammed the knotted red scarf onto the mahogany bench and untied it. A mountain of working-class money spilled across the wood. 50s, crumpled ones smelling of diner grease, and heavy rolls of quarters. "Count it," Leo demanded, glaring at the corporate lawyer. The court clerk quickly began sorting the chaotic pile of bills and change. The room held its breath. Clara stared at the young man, trembling. After 2 agonizing minutes, the clerk looked up at the judge. "Your Honor, the total is $4,110. The air left the room. Leo's face fell. He patted his empty pockets. He was $10 short. Richard Sterling, the corporate lawyer, let out a sharp, mocking laugh. "Well, an impressive theatrical display, but the law is the law. The debt is not satisfied. Drop the gavel, Your Honor." The judge looked at the pile of dirty money. He looked at the grease-stained boy. He looked at Clara, who had lowered her head in defeat. "Mr. Sterling is right," the judge said softly. "The law is absolute. The debt must be paid in full." The judge slowly reached under his heavy black robe. He pulled out his own leather wallet. He extracted a crisp $10 bill, leaned forward, and gently laid it on top of the pile of quarters. And as of this exact moment, the judge said, staring directly into the lawyer's eyes, "It is." The lawyer's jaw dropped. He looked around the room, completely defeated by a system that had suddenly remembered how to be human. Leo turned to Clara. He picked up the faded red wool scarf from the bench and held it out to her. Clara gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth as she recognized the scarf she had wrapped around a thermos 3 years ago. Tears spilled over her cheeks. "You kept me alive, Mrs. Evans," Leo whispered. "Now we're keeping your house." The judge picked up his gavel and brought it down with a loud echoing crack. Case dismissed. The lawyer packed his briefcase in furious silence and left. But no one watched him go. The entire courtroom watched a grease-stained mechanic wrap his arms around a weeping 82-year-old woman. Kindness is not a transaction, it is an investment, and it compounds with interest. When Clara placed that soup on her snowy porch, she thought she was just giving an invisible stranger a hot meal. She had no idea she was buying back her own home. She didn't know that by saving a boy, she was raising her own guardian. Never look down on the people who are struggling today, because they might be the ones holding the door open for you tomorrow, and never forget that the warmth you put into the world will always find its way back to you when the winter comes. If this story touched your heart, please leave a comment below. Share it with someone who needs to believe in the goodness of people today, and subscribe to Storybuddy for more true tales of the beautiful, unbroken chain of human kindness.